Hi everyone, how are you? My name is Anuradha Kumari and today I'm going to present on the topic accessible information and data visualization. Let's start. A brief introduction about myself. I'm working as a development specialist at MediaOcean. I'm also media developer expert at Cloudinary. I consider myself as accessibility advocate and you can find me talking a lot about accessibility as well as writing blogs around it. So if you want to connect with me, my LinkedIn ID is Anuradha15 and you can also connect with me on Twitter at miracle_404. So let's start the topics that we are going to cover today. We will see first what exactly is accessibility. Then we will also understand a little bit about what is information, how do we share it, and what is data visualization. Then we will see some tips and tricks on how can we make them accessible, and also some of the tools and resources which will be useful for us while we are learning around accessibility. So the first question always, what exactly is accessibility? So accessibility, or it has a neuronym called A11Y, where 11 refers to the number of letters between A and Y. So accessibility means making the resources and services usable by everyone, regardless of their ability or disability. Okay. So what are different types of information? So information is like, it could be in any form, like it could be in text, like we have blogs, we have news, like newspapers and articles. We have text all over the place, banners, posters, websites, applications everywhere. Then images are a powerful source of information. We can convey a lot using images. Then there are medias like audio, video. So there are different types of information, and there are different channels in which we can share this information with others, like online resources. You can share them on your website, application. Then print, they can be printed in newspapers, banners, posters, etc. Then we can also share information using audio, like maybe a podcast or radios, right? Broadcasting the information, or we can create videos, YouTube videos, or videos on our own websites, news channels, etc., TV. Then there are electronic documents which can be shared and information can be circulated via them. Now that we know about information, let's see what is data visualization. So data visualization is like, there's lots of data available in the world, and it's a way of like a graphical representation of that data. So if you read a huge chunk of data, that might not make much sense, but if we say make some sort of representation of data, like using some visual elements like maybe graphs, charts, maps, which makes it easier to understand what that information is about or what that data represents. So it is basically used to represent some sort of patterns or trends of these kind of things. And yeah, the most common examples are, we can have graphs, charts like pie charts, we have bars, we have maps, etc. There are multiple types of ways in which we can visualize our data and represent them or present them to our users. Now, let me make a statement. So here, what today we are going to talk about is like accessibility should be a core goal of information and data visualization. So whatever we do, whatever kind of data we are creating, that visualization we are creating, or the information which we are sharing, accessibility should always be at the core. We must never forget about accessibility. And why so? Let's see why. So because as per WHO, or World Health Organization, around 15% of world's total population, they live with some sort of disability. Now this 15% translates to around 1 billion people around the world. That's a lot. There are different types of disabilities, like visual, the people are not able to see, they are not able to see, or there is some partial blindness or color blindness. There are different types of visual disabilities. Then auditory disabilities, motor disabilities, Also cognitive disabilities, where people are not able to understand very complex things, or they struggle while understanding data in different form, like representation in different form. So there are different types of disabilities, there are different type of people. So whatever we are creating, is it accessible to all of them? So for example, if we are creating image and a person cannot see, so how can we make that resource available to those? So we are going to see all these different things today. So accessibility is about disability, and it is more than that. So it also applies to people who are having some technical challenges. Let's say some person is trying to access our content on a slow internet connection. Then these heavy assets like images and maps, videos, what if they are not accessible? So video keep buffering, and they are not able to access it properly. So have we provided some alternate thing for them so that they can still access the information which was there? Then there could be like, they could be using it on different device types. They could be using on smaller devices like mobile, iPad. So have we made our content responsive so that whatever be the device size, they are still able to understand our content effectively? Then there would be different situations like I could see maybe perfectly fine, but maybe I'm in a brighter environment, and during that time I'm still could not be able to read what is on my screen. So there could be different situations. Also, there are some disabilities which come, which are progressive, like they come as the time progresses or so. For example, aging. So a person who might have a very perfect eyesight today, or as the age increases, the eyesight might start decreasing, or they might have some problem with sight. So then again, this comes under progressive disability. Now, to cater all these kinds of people, so because whatever data or whatever information we want to share, so it's a right of everyone, regardless of disability. Everyone should have access to this information and the data. So for that, so W3C has this specific guidelines called WCAG. So there are 4 principles. So WCAG means Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They have these 4 underlying principles, what our content should follow in order to be accessible. So they are acronymed as POUR. So let's see one by one what these are. So here P means perceivable. Perceivable means that whatever content there is, it should be perceived by the user via any senses. So either by looking at it like by sight, or by hearing, or by touch. So through any senses, that information or that content should be perceivable by any user. O means operable. Now that they have perceived what the information is or what the content is, they should be able to operate on it. So for example, if there is a button, then they should be able to click on it. So if one is using mouse, they should be able to click on it via mouse. And if I am using keyboard, I should also be able to access that button and able to trigger the click action on that button. Then U means understandable. So whatever actions and data that we have provided on our websites or application, is it understandable by all people, all users? So for example, could be maybe a form. So there is a form and there are lots of inputs to be filled. But if there are no labels on them, and let's say I'm using a screen reader, which is a form of assistive technology. So if I cannot see, I will be using a software called screen reader, and it will read to me everything that is on screen. Now, if the forms will not have labels, I won't be able to understand what to fill in those inputs, right? So we should make sure that whatever we are creating, whatever thing, the content we have, that should be understandable by all users. And robust. R stands for robust, and which means that it should be accessible by all different types of devices, like these assistive technologies. So the technologies are changing, they are getting better and better again, but whatever we are, the support which we are providing, that should be robust enough to support all these technologies and all these devices, so that users should be able to access all this content regardless of how they are using it. Okay, so let's start and see what accessible information means. So information, it means that the information can be, whatever information we are providing, that should be perceived and understood by people by using different senses, like the sight, like they could use their eyes, they could see and understand, or they could hear and understand, or they could touch and understand, like, you know, braille technology, they could touch and still understand what information is being passed on to them. So this is important, and why we are talking about it, because this is really important. So information is very important. Information is like, you can say, a sort of human right, because it enables us to function properly in the society. It enables us to understand what are the different laws and legislation, or what are different things happening around us, or many things. I mean, everything what we do and what we not do, it's based upon information, right? So currently, in like from last 1 year or 1.5 years, we are going through pandemic, COVID-19, and here our lives have been forced, like we are forced to live online. So we are forced to do all the things online more than ever. So everything is moving digital, everything is going online and digital. So like from your work to shopping for groceries, medicals, or, you know, education, then meetings, everything are going up online. Now here we can really admit that internet has become a prerequisite for participating fully and equally in this life, like, you know, democracy and society. So now it is most important that this information is accessible by all people in the world. So everyone must have equal access to this information, so that they can understand everything, or they can know all the things that are happening in the world, right? So that's why it's most important right now. So this is the right time that we start thinking from accessibility perspective and try to make everything as much accessible as we can. So today we are going to see some of the tips on how we can create accessible information. So the first thing is using a clear and simple language, like keep it simple, keep it concise, so that it is understandable by more and more people. So for example, whenever we are writing anything, or whenever we are creating any content, any form of information, use of active verb is always preferred over passive verb, so that it is easily understandable. Then keep your sentences short and to the point. Like if one sentence should always point to one thing, one concept, like, okay, 1 point, 1 sentence kind of thing. Also keep the paragraph short, and also one paragraph should write about, or we should talk about one idea only. It should not be a jumbled mix of ideas, so that when people are reading, they get really confused what we exactly are trying to talk about. What should we not do, like what should we avoid while we are creating any information, is we should avoid as much as jargons or abbreviation as we can. So like if there is a possibility that user might not know or understand those jargons or abbreviation, do not use it. Even if you are using it, do provide an alternative for it, like what is the full form of that abbreviation, or what that jargon means. So then we also avoid long sentences. So if it's a very long sentence, a person with maybe a cognitive disability, they might not be able to comprehend it properly. They won't be able to understand it properly, because when they start reading the sentence and when it ends, they might have lost the half context of it. Also, get rid of unnecessary words. So like keep it concise, and we do not need to add any unnecessary words to our content. Then whenever we are creating anything, like anything we are writing, we are displaying some text. This is specifically for text. So font style and size, we should be very careful while using font styles and font sizes. So for example, it's always advisable that we should use big font. So like 12 points is minimum which we should use, but we should go beyond that in my opinion. And it should be very clear, easily readable. The color contrast should be very good. So like color contrast means the difference in the color of foreground and background. So for example, here, the foreground is black color and the background is white. So this is properly readable content. So we should always maintain good color contrast. There are different tools to check color contrast, which I have mentioned later in my slides as well. Then use proper punctuation. Whenever we use proper punctuation, it becomes more understandable. So it becomes more clear what we are trying to convey to the user. And also when screen readers start reading those content, they understand punctuation and they know that pause that they have to take when that punctuation comes. So it's very important even for sighted users, for people who have because if you don't provide punctuation, it increases the cognitive load. We won't be able to understand. I mean, any people, most of the people won't be able to understand it properly if the punctuations are not proper. Also the spacing between lines and paragraphs, also words. The spacing should be proper so that we are able to understand what a word is, what a line is, what a paragraph is, and it's easily readable and it doesn't feel very overwhelming, right? And yeah, we use different colors for highlighting certain things, but if we have some important things to emphasize on, we could also use bold text, because there are people who face certain types of color blindness, so they might not be able to differentiate between different colors. But if the text is bold, they would be easily able to understand. Also, if among a big text there are some bold text, so eye goes there automatically, right? So if you're reading it, you can find yourself focusing on those. So it's also easy to understand and get the main points of that paragraph if something is bolded. And if we use this strong for, then even a screen reader understands that, okay, this particular word or set of words had more emphasis. So yeah, they will dictate it accordingly. Then what should be avoid is creating everything in uppercase. I mean, if you are writing everything in uppercase, it's really hard to read. And it's also harder for screen readers to understand what exactly the text is. Then using some font styles which are very, very hard to read. I mean, just don't use any font style for styling. Like, yeah, it looks beautiful, so I'm going to make it this heavy cursive text. It should also be understandable by people. So it should be readable. We are creating it so that it should be readable, right? So let's make it readable. And if we are either making it too tight, so if the spacing between letters is not good, then again, it might not be easy to read. Also the same when we have overstretched the words. So if we have overstretched the words, so we might not be able to understand that where the word starts and ends. So it becomes little difficult. So let's see through an example what these all mean. So yeah. There's an example. So this one here, if you see autism spectrum disorder, so this is in all caps. So it takes a while to process what is written, while everything else which is in smaller letters, it's little easier to understand. And then what about this? Here, what we are doing, we are using very bad color contrast, let's say. So if I have a very low sightedness, so I have low sight, so I won't be able to read it properly. Then this is one different font style which I'm using. So this might be a little difficult for some of the people to understand what it is written, because everything is jumbled together. So yeah. Also, let's see a proper example, a very simple example. So this is a same paragraph which I have written, but with a simple font and a bigger font size, and also the spacing between, if you see spacing between letters, words, also spacing between lines. So it's easily understandable, and also emphasized on few words. So I tried to make it strong, like bolden it, so that we could see that, okay, we should have consistent and straightforward things. these things. So this is could be a good example. So you can understand how to create information based upon it. Also, providing alternative formats. So like as I told, so let's see. We are creating images for many things. We share images and there are lots of things maybe are shown there or emphasized there, some symbols and all. But the person who cannot see, they won't be able to understand a bit of it, right? So for that, we must always provide alternative text for it. So alternative text means everywhere. So whenever you are adding your images, everywhere we have the option to add alternative text. If you are developing your code in HTML, so in image tag, you can add alt. And also it should be meaningful. It should be meaningful so that the users really understand what that image is stood for. This is not only important for people who cannot see. Let's say for due to some reason that image didn't load. In that case, also that all text is shown. So if I am going through a website and some images didn't load, then I could see the all text and understand what exactly that image stood for. Then there are videos. So if we are creating videos, we should always caption those, because it's really helpful for people, not only the people who cannot hear. So it's also useful for people who are maybe from different language. They do not understand the language in which we are creating videos. So it could be useful for them as well, right? And then if we are creating any audio, we should also have some text form of it, which is called transcription, so that if I cannot hear, I could still read through it and understand what exactly that audio was about. Then there are some websites which are complex and we need to have lots of data and information there. So for those websites, we could also opt for creating another version of that website or that content, which is easy to read version. So when users come on that website, we can ask them that, hey, do you prefer, do you have any requirement of reading a easy to read version? If yes, then you can navigate to this instead. And in fact, this is done by many websites and even government websites, because this is really important, specifically for, again, users with cognitive conditions, so that they could process that easy information, like information in an easier way. So we have seen some of the tips on how to create accessible information. Now, data visualization is an extension of it. And by name itself, it means visual, right? So it's a visual medium which we use to represent our data and information. But this does not mean that we don't have the responsibility to make this information accessible to everyone. So in fact, we have a bigger responsibility to make this information as well accessible to all. So whenever we are designing or developing visualizations with accessibility in mind, so at least we should be aware of multiple cases. So the at least what cases we should be available, aware of are like the users could be interacting through it via a screen readers or any other assistive technologies, or the users who are looking at it, they might have low vision or color blindness, or or they could be color blind. So they could have some color blindness condition. So is our data or our visualization really accessible to all these different sets of people? And also there could be people with cognitive disabilities. They might not be able to comprehend a lot of data at once, and also they might feel overwhelmed if they see a lot of data at a place. So how do we make this data accessible for everyone? Let's see some of the tips for that. So the first thing is adding title to your visualization. So how does it help? So add a title which gives a takeaway of that visualization. So we were getting a chart or a bar, graphs, anything, whatever we are creating, add a descriptive title which will let the user know what this is about and what will be my takeaway, right? So it also reduces, again, what it's called is cognitive load. So I don't have to read through everything or look through the that chart to understand what exactly it is about. I get it right away. So I know what that chart is about, right? So for example, this chart where It's like it's representing the number of students who are playing these sports in a school called XYZ. So by providing a title called sports played by students of XYZ school, we know that this is going to be a representation wherein we are seeing how many students play what type of sports, right? So it really helps users. Then again, providing alternative text, which we just saw. So we can provide this so that users, so that screen readers can read it out. Now, how do we provide alt text for data visualization? Like maybe it's a huge chart or a bar. How do we provide a alt text? So it should not be very big. Ideally, it should be like a short description of what that visualization is. And then also, it might also include so we could also provide an alternative data table for them. So we could provide a table, a link to a table where we have that data in tabular representation, or there could be some links to files like CSV files. They can click on it, it gets downloaded, or it gets open up, and they can tab through it and understand what the data is. So because tabular data is they are accessible by screen readers, so they can tap through it and understand what exactly that data is about. So here I will give you just an example. This is a tweet which was which was sent out by Sarah, where they showed how the screen reader was reading a map by other guardians. So if you see here, so everything wherever they are trying to tap and go to a different section of that map, it's just saying image. So if I cannot see, I will never be able to understand what was that state or what were those figures. What I will hear is just image. So this is example of a very bad alt text. So as you can see how it can become very frustrating, and also the data is not accessible at all. So I mean, what will they understand by just hearing image, image, image all over again, right? So this is why alt text is really important. So we use lots of colors when we are using data visualization. Definitely that is one of the primary things which we use to highlight one of the data different from the other type of data. But use it. I mean, I'm not saying not to use it. We are going to use it, right? But we should not rely only on colors to provide information to the users. So you can label the data. So if you label the data, user will be able to understand more if even if they are not able to understand those different colors, right? So let's see an example. So this example here, if you see, I have 3 different lines, and there is a legend here. So there is, it says that the blue one represents blueberries, red one is raspberries, and the green one is grapes, right? So if you can perceive colors correctly, you will see that, okay, what is wrong with this graph, right? So let's see. Now let me try to simulate different kinds of color blindness, right? So here what I will say, so I'm using this No Coffee extension, which is the browser extension which comes in, called No Coffee Vision Simulator. So I'm going to give it color deficiency. We can have different types of color deficiency. So there is one type of color deficiency which is called achromatopsia, wherein they don't see any colors, they see everything in black, white, and gray. So if I go ahead and do this, now are you able to figure out which one is blueberries or which one could be raspberries? So I mean, these two are very, very similar, very similar. I won't be able to understand what it is, right? So what could be a better example? So labeling it, right? So what I'm doing here, we are labeling this information. So now, even if it's all looks similar color, still we know what is blueberries or raspberries, grapes. We know the difference, like which line represents what kind of data. So yes, this is what is meant by like, don't rely only on data. I will turn this off. So yeah, and now if you can see that if you can perceive colors correctly, then also it makes sense. If you cannot perceive colors correctly, then also it makes sense, right? So it's accessible to all people, to everyone. We are including everyone now by labeling that data. Using white spaces. So when we are creating something and there is lots of data, it might be very densely packed. So if it's very dense, it might be overwhelming. Or it could also be unreadable. We won't be able to understand between different parts of that chart, right? So if we use white spaces judicially, we will be able to give that division that, okay, this data represents to this type of like this data is for a certain level, another that section is for that different type of data. So for example, if you see here, there are 3 different colors which would be representing different types of data. And now, as you can see, there is no label, so I don't know what exactly is that, but that's okay. We are talking about white spaces right now and how we can distinguish between sections. So still these colors seem to be distinguishable. Now let's see a different form of color deficiency. So let's go to another one. So now here, if you see, they still can see colors, but in different way. Now these first 2, I cannot find a clear distinctions between these 2 sections. So I won't be able to understand where the first data stopped and the second data started. So what if we provide a small white space between them, like a very small, a white divider line in this example? So here we can still understand, right, that okay, where the first division stopped and the second division started. So it's used to divide sections clearly so that it's more visible and more understandable that, okay, these are different separate sections and we should treat them as such. So like visually, we can visually identify each chunk separately now, which is really important. And okay, so now, using proper color contrast. So color blindness is not the only thing. There are multiple other things like color contrast. So color contrast should be good in order for people to understand properly what we are trying to show them. So if there is low contrast, so low contrast means a very less difference between the colors of foreground and background. So it will make the text hard to read. We won't be able to read it properly or understand right? And also if there is high contrast, like very bright, in short, like if you're using very bright colors everywhere, like neon colors and all, then it could be overwhelming for some people who have sensory issues. So like it could also be painful on eyes, right? So let's see an example. So in this example, I'm using very, very low color contrast. So it's very low, so it doesn't look very readable. And also if I change some vision, like I simulate with maybe some people who have like low or some color deficiency again, I mean, it would be like very less readable sort of. They won't be able to understand exactly. So in fact, what we can do is we can have proper color contrast, and the color should be like, it could be pleasant to eyes so that it doesn't really pain, or it doesn't feel very overwhelming, like, yeah, I want to look away from screen now, those kind of things, right? So here we are using good colors and also using labels with data. So we can understand it properly what exactly this pie chart represents. Then keyboard accessibility. So there are many data visualization where, you know, users need to interact with them, like they can interact with them. They could go through one and the other parts of the map, or one and the other part of that bars in that bar charts and so on. So also they could be like clickable. So the rule of thumb is that whatever navigation the mouse users can do, the same navigation should also be provided, or the similar navigation should also be provided to the users who are using assistive technology. So if I'm using a keyboard, I shouldn't be left out. I should also be able to do some sort of navigation, that navigation. Also, like if we're putting any information on hover, so it should not be the only way to show that information, because if you are using mobile, then also you can't hover over it, right? You could tap on it, you cannot hover over it, so that information will be lost. And even if we are using keyboard, we cannot exactly hover over it. So if we are using a screen readers and all that, that information might get lost. So we must like provide them a way in which they should be able to access this information. And so users should be able to navigate via keyboard also, and also they should be like able to exit from that it should not be like we block them there, like we they get stuck in that, they start tabbing and they are never able to come out of that data visualization, that map or that graph, whatever that is. They should not be stuck. We should provide them a way to exit from that loop. Also, if it seems not very possible, then again we must always provide an alternative data source, so which is machine readable, like again tables or files like CSV. It should be readable to the machine, because screen readers are going to read that, and we should user should be able to read it using tabs and access that information. So that alternate data source should always be provided. Animations. So there are animations there, right? Whenever we are creating, there are lots of animations which we use while creating data visualization. Now, small animation might be okay, but if we have something which is heavily animated or depends on animation, so we should always remember that not all users feel comfortable while looking at animations. There are some users, so I have this link here. So this is a website which I have created, where I write some, whatever I read about accessibility, I go ahead and write some resources and tips for accessibility. So for animation, so there are people with conditions like vestibular motion disorder. So they find it troubling when they watch animation. And in every device, whether it's a mobile or it's a laptop, I mean, any kind of device, you always have user settings. So there are user settings in which we can turn off the animation. Like we can say that, hey, I don't want to see the animation, so user can turn it off. Now if user has that settings on, we must respect that user settings, right? So if rule of thumb is that don't show animation to the users if they don't want to see them. In fact, provide them some alternative, like a static image or a static visualization or static data. Again, to how can we control this user device settings? So there is a media query, CSS media query, which is called prefers reduce motion. So we can use this to control when the user want to see animation or when they do not want to see the animation. So in website, I have all the details about it, how we can use it in CSS media query, as well as if you want to use it in some language like JavaScript. So these were the tips about data visualization, like how can we, by being mindful of some of the tips, how can we create accessible data visualization. I want to talk about social media accessibility. This is like a bonus, one slide, some tips about, because we create lots of resources on social media. We share them, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I mean, they are everywhere. We share them everywhere. So it's really important to understand some of the things which we can do so that we make this information as well accessible for all people. So the first thing is using link shorteners. Why? Because it has actually multiple benefits. It also shortens the number of characters in your post, definitely, which is really useful for Twitter, but it's more than that. Whenever a screen reader starts reading, they have less characters to read for that link, maybe, and they don't again feel overwhelming by writing a very huge link there. So, and link, so there are multiple link shorteners that are available. We can use them by sharing the links. Again, the things which we have discussed previously as well, whenever you are using images, always add all text to it. Everything like Twitter, LinkedIn, they provide an option to add all text. So don't miss it and provide meaningful all text so that it really explains what your image is. Caption your videos and transcript your audios. Yeah. Also emojis. We use lots of emojis on social media, right? But I mean, I'm not telling you not to use. I also use emojis, but we should limit the uses. The reason, let's say you have 10 laughing emojis in a row. So the screen readers read out these emojis or emoticons. So they will say laughing, laughing, laughing face, laughing face, laughing face, laughing face. So 10 times they're going to repeat that. So it again might be very overwhelming and not too useful for the users. So yeah, it's upon you how you want to use it. But to make it accessible, we should limit the emoji uses. Also, hashtags. Oh, the whole world is fan of hashtags, right? We use lots of hashtags. But whenever we are using hashtags, always be very careful. Don't use it's all in small caps or all in capital case. Use Pascal casing. What Pascal casing means that capitalizing first letter of every word. So if you see an example here, the first one, you can easily read it, right? Hashtag easy to read and accessible because every word's first letter is capitalized. So I'm able to segregate and I'm able to understand when the first word ends and the second word starts. And this is also understandable by screen readers because they can also read it, the Pascal casing. But if we write in all small case, right? So it becomes little difficult to understand and comprehend like what exactly it means. And it will take more time to understand and it's not very accessible. It's not very readable by screen readers as well. So yeah, always keep in mind to use Pascal case for hashtags. Okay. So this is all about the tips. Let's see some of the tools which we can use to like test about accessibility and yeah. So there are some of the browser tools and extensions which I mentioned, like Lighthouse, Acts, Wave. These are extensions. Lighthouse comes with it. So like this is a website. So on any website, you right click and say inspect. Then this developer tools opens up. In this developer tools, there is something called Lighthouse. So in this Lighthouse, you can generate report for your accessibility. It's showing me error because I have actually a service workers for this website and looks like multiple websites are open. But it will work totally fine if there are no service workers. So that's fine. Then there is a No Coffee, which I demoed during when I was giving examples. So this No Coffee simulator is very easy. But the thing is, I was not able to find a link for it. So when I go to the link of this extension, it says that the page doesn't exist. So I provided another option, which is color blinding. I haven't used it. I found it today only. So, but yeah, I think it works well for simulating different types of color blindness. So you can add it to browser, and so that whenever we're creating something, you can directly simulate it from the browser and understand how it is I mean, how much or how not accessible it is, right? So then there are different color contrast tools because color contrast is a really important part of accessibility. So there are different tools which are provided. Go ahead and check them out. You can also create some of the accessible color palette using these tools and also simulate color blindness. Then so when we talk about accessibility, there are different official guidelines about it. Now, I have provided link to these WCAG 2.0 references. So like web content accessibility guideline references, wherein what they talk about mostly, this is applicable for data visualization and information sharing, like text alternatives. And if you have non-text content, what should we do? And information and relationship between different parts of content, and also use of color. So I provided links, you can read it. It becomes little overwhelming when you are reading it in the start because there's a lot of content in these websites. So yeah, if you see, but Yes, once you start reading it, it really makes sense. So for example, if we are checking for non-text content, so it provides good information and links on how you can provide alt information for all these non-text content. So these are really nice resources. Then the resources which I use to prepare for this topic, as well as I have also provided a link of my website where I often write about web accessibility and the resources which I find out. So you can go through them and read more about accessibility for information and data visualization. To summarize, access to information is a right of every person, and we must make sure that we are making everything accessible. Whenever we are creating anything, always think from accessibility perspective. Use like accessible colors, color contrast, font styling, sizes, spacing, all these things. Provide alternative for any type of media. And the last but not the least, I mean, testing by our own is good, but we must also test with real users so that we really get to know their pain points and they can tell us better about what we are doing right, what we are doing wrong. So we always need to collaborate with real users and test with them. I also have an action item, but yeah, before that, so I would like to say that as we are like increasingly shifting like to digital solutions for everything, let's make sure that the online world which we are creating, this digital world which we are creating, it's the one where everyone has equal access. Like everyone has access to information, data, everything, you know. Let's create an accessible world. So I have action item for you, and it is like, if we have learned anything today, so please pass on the learning. So we are going to, this is how we spread awareness around accessibility. So we need to tell each other, we need to pass on the learnings, pass on our experiences so that others also get benefited by it. And we all start creating an accessible world. So all the resources like this presentation as well as different websites. So you can, if you want to access those, you can scan the QR code or visit this website t.ly/IFSO in capital. So you can visit this link and you will get access to the slides. It also contains a feedback form. So do drop me a feedback about what you liked or what you did not like about today's content and what you would like me to talk more about, so that I can improve myself. Thanks a lot. It was very nice presenting to you all. Thank you. Have a nice day.